CCU Orlando, Natural Awakenings Magazine, and Unity of Nashville present The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 54, You Seek Opportunities to be Vulnerable, 7 Signs of an Evolving Soul, Part 6. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello, friends, and welcome. My name is Cynthia Alice, and I am the host of The Authentic Spiritual Journey. We're here in 818 Studios with my incredibly talented producer.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us. If nobody has said it yet, let me be the first to say happy Monday and welcome to the week. We are the dog days of summer. I don't know, when did the dog days actually start?
I don't know. Well, in Florida, they started in March.
Oh, that's the truth. But thank you so much for joining us. We have an amazing show for you today.
Yes, happy Monday, friends. Even if it's not Monday you're listening, it's a happy day wherever you are, whenever you are listening. But we're always happy to be joining you and are so honored, really, that you're a part of our program and that so many of you are sharing. The word is getting out, dear friends, and I can't tell you how excited that makes me. This show began as an idea that really turned into a dream that really began to manifest as goals, and we've just followed through for over a year or so. I want to say to you, welcome to year number 2.
Year number 2. This is the second show. Yep, of year number 2.
Yeah, and that's really exciting for us. And new sponsors are coming forward. I've talked to several Unity ministers, so I'm going to give a couple shout outs to John McLean at Unity of Nashville, and also Temple Hayes at Unity of St. Pete, and just talked with another friend too. So we'll tell you more, as that comes forward. But the sponsorship, the support. It means so much, and I can't tell you how that inspires us to keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, and also a shout out to Natural Awakenings, and so they have come on board as a sponsor level patron, and so and we're really excited to have like a real ad in there.
A real ad in Natural Awakenings. Somehow I feel like we arrived, even though there's more to do.
Yeah, I know.
But Margaret with Natural Awakenings is a wonderful spiritual soul, and we hope to have her maybe later on the show if I can get her to do it.
Yeah, so you'll hear about, we heard about them last week, but you'll also hear a little bit about them at the halfway point.
Yes, so this work means a great deal to me. It is the book I'm currently working on now. I've actually got several books right now I'm cooking, but this one in particular has risen to the top because of the impact it seems to be making and the accessibility, I guess, of the teachings, because it doesn't matter what religion you are or what faith you find yourself, or if you find yourself in a church or a faith group at all, what we've been hearing is that these are cross-denominational. I'll even say pan-denominational in terms of their this is not a word, but understandability,
sure, yeah.
and their application. So that makes me really happy because of how these came forward. And I mentioned before it on the phone with my dear friend and colleague John McLean about something totally different, and these started coming through, and we talked about them, and I wrote down all 7. And so the 7 signs are easily accessible, they are relatable, they are very easy to put into practice in terms of awareness. And I want to tell you that some ideas around all of this I've been working on, even ideas around the show, is that the whole show, yes, it's about spiritual principles. Yes, it's about the soul journey. Yes, it's about spiritual conversations with friends. But ultimately, it's about reawakening our consciousness.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said, you mentioned that the show and the material we do here on the podcast and in the channel is really kind of cross religions. And that brings us to our country of the week that we are giving a shout out. And those are listeners in the UAE, United Arab Emirates. And I really can't think of another, faith which has historically seemed on the diametric opposite side of traditional Christianity. But here we are. We have listeners in the UAE, and one of the things I love about Unity is it embraces all faiths and realizing God within and God all around.
Yes, and it's been very interesting for me as an author because some of my books I have sold a large number actually to practitioners, people who those who practice Islam as their major religion, and I also have friends in UAE. So I several years ago I went to Austria and I was in a workshop in the Peace Castle. We've mentioned it before on the show. And what was so amazing, there were only about 120 participants at this workshop, but over 70 countries were represented. And one of my good friends there that became a good friend is from UAE. And even in college, I also want to shout out to my buddies because in college, I was part of something called the Intensive English Language Institute. So there was an institute at my college, which was Seattle Pacific University, and people came to the college from all around the world. Of course, a lot in the Pacific Rim countries because we're in Seattle, like Japan and all that. But there was a large number too from UAE, and so one of my primary relationships in the Language Institute was with men actually from the UAE. So I got a lot of love, a lot of connection, a lot of. I was really let in to some of the customs and beliefs. And even I was invited to an event that was normally men only. And I really learned a lot about the culture. So I bless you. I thank you. And to those in UAE, I say, Salam Alaikum. And I know right now you're saying back to me, Alaikum Salam, right? So peace to you is Salam Alaikum. And also to you, alaikum salam. So we bless you. We thank you from the UAE that you are joining us here on the show today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and always, and like we always say, tell your friends.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not shy about that anymore, friends. I'm coming out. I want to play that in the background. I'm coming out. I'm coming out as a speaker and an author, and I'm not being shy about that anymore. I love this work. I love what we're accomplishing together here in the studio, and I love that it's going out worldwide. So, the 7 signs, I'm going to read all of them first, say maybe a word or two about the ones we've hit just because we're continuing to try to get these, I use the word cemented in our consciousness, but that's not the word I want to use. I want to use the word planted because cemented is so definite and frozen. But the idea is we're planting seeds in our consciousness so that they can mature and grow. So as I listened to a former show, I said, I don't like that word. So I want you guys to erase the word cement from your consciousness and help me as we replace it with a better, more appropriate, more descriptive word.
I like that. Cement seems like it hardens and then it's immovable.
And then it even cracks and gets yuck. But no, this is about new ideas that are wanting to come forward and be made manifest in you. And so it is much like a plant grows and blooms, right? Because 7 signs of an evolving soul is a teaching that is about us evolving every day. It doesn't mean the 7 signs don't mean you do all these perfectly and you've arrived. And today is one of the toughest ones, actually. The last 2 are the toughest of all 7.
Week 1 when you laid them out, I'm like, oh, these are going to be the ones that stretch me.
Yeah, either the listenership will go way up, or people will just turn it off and go, "This sounds too hard." But I don't. I'm done worrying about what anybody thinks about this because I know from over 30 years of working with people. As a music director, as a choir director, I've worked with children in ministry, I've worked with adults, with couples. These 7 things are tried and true. Mm-hmm. And I know that when someone is seeking to evolve in these areas, that their life changes for the better. So, yes, today is a tough one. And again, the title for today is You Seek Opportunities to Be Vulnerable. You seek opportunities to be vulnerable. And right now, I can hear somebody going, "Oh no!"
Yeah, that's because not without really getting into it, but I don't have any problem being vulnerable when the need to be vulnerable is thrust on me. Like, oh, you have to be vulnerable here, But actively seeking them out, that's the tough part.
Well, plus, I mean, you're a guy in America. What guy in America has learned vulnerability is a good idea? As a matter of fact, it's a good jumping off point to even say this. I mean. I love working with men, actually, on spirituality. And, people often joke with me that, I don't have any women friends. All my friends are men. I just feel, I don't know, more at ease somehow. But what I know from all of my close friends that are men and from the men I've worked with, it's like the basic message for men, and the men in the room can correct me, is, if you have feelings, well, that's a sign of weakness, right? Men can be angry, but not sad. Women can be sad but not angry. I mean, those are general stereotypes.
And yeah, and I can't remember ever like my father like laying that on me. He never said, quit your crying.
Buck up, right?
Yeah, I never remember any of that. It just felt like it was just in the zeitgeist, right? It was just kind of effervescing in the culture.
Yeah.
Sometimes almost unspoken, and just by the demonstration of characters in movies and fiction and everything.
Yes. Well, in movies, and TV make it worse. I mean, they're not even really two-dimensional characters hardly, especially now. So yeah, and part of evolution, part of evolving, part of growth is that we are learning to be a more whole self. So there are really there's like a new 21st century masculinity that includes vulnerability for men and women. And also what's happening, I see with females right now, with so many women I serve, women are moving into more positions of authority and are working to figure out, how do I move into this more powerful role, but still keep my feminine nature as well, not taking on the masculine of control and things like that are historically seen as masculine. So even if you're not taught it, like you're saying, Dave, specifically, it's like it's in the air we breathe.
Right.
It's in the movies. It's in newspaper. It's how things are reported on in the news even. Right. What stories are given which weight. So all of these are aspects of.
Yeah, I didn't mean to jump. I'm so ready to talk about it.
No, that's good. That's good. So let's read the 7 signs of an evolving soul, starting with number 1. And we've said over and over, number 1, you love yourself. You love yourself. Number 1 sign of an evolving soul, you love yourself. This is important because without number 1, none of the other ones are really going to come forward for you. Again, as we talk about each of these, I'm just feeling I want to pause. It doesn't mean you're doing these perfectly. It means you are seeking to love yourself completely. And friends, I'm here to tell you, in my own life and in those I've served, intention is everything. As you seek to love yourself, you're going to be given opportunities. And some of the opportunities are going to be pretty darn hard because you're going to have to learn to listen to your inner voice above anyone else's. You're going to have to learn to listen to the voice of spirit. You're going to have to learn to honor your sacred process, by doing your soul work and things like that, listening to what your feelings might be, and then acting from the soul. So you love yourself is a critical, may not be the right word, but extremely important point to begin with. You love yourself. Number 2 of the 7 signs, number 2 sign is your heart is open and loving. This one, too, is the act of spiritual mastery, especially if you have negativity, feelings of less than that are coming forward, so if you're feeling attacked psychically, emotionally, even physically, so when we say our heart's open and loving, and I want to really say this many times, it doesn't mean that we let people treat us like a doormat. It doesn't mean we allow ourselves to be abused. As a matter of fact, it just means that we learn not to defend in a way to hurt others. So I've had people in unity, because we talk so much about love, say, well, this happened with someone I knew and her husband, and she said, well, he hits me, but I've forgiven him, and so it's going to be okay. And I say, no, this is not love, so we need to talk about that. So I always want you to hear me say your heart is open and loving doesn't mean people take advantage of us. What it means is we remain open and loving as we're trying to hear the voice of spirit. And sometimes to do that, we have to get out of a harmful situation. So hear that with me. I hope you are connecting with this. But when we can get to that place of being open and loving. We know what's ours to do, when and how to do it, and that doing then is done out of love rather than defensiveness or hatred or trying to get even, and that's what we want to seek to do. Everything I'm speaking about has karmic implications, not only for now in this lifetime, but for the future. Often people say to me, well, I want to know what my future is going to be about. And I say, your future is being decided right here, right now, by every action you are taking. You are setting yourself up in every moment by how you respond, by how you relate, by how you speak, by how you do relationship of all kinds. So as much as possible, we want to live from this place of our heart being open and loving. So number 1, you love yourself. Number 2, your heart is open and loving. And number 3, you are aware you are one with all. This is a great one too, because of the far-reaching impact of this teaching, including how we spend our money, where we shop, how we treat the environment, how we treat those around us. So all of these teachings, even in the beginning stages, begin to shift everything. Yeah, this show I've connected with a lot because of a reminder. There were a couple areas I realized I'd gotten a little lazy in my practice of this, and this one is huge. This one can shift everything. You are aware that you are one with all means everything I do, there is no other. There's only me. There's only me.
Right.
So number 4 sign is your life is meaningful and has purpose. And this is about us just getting really clear about what's ours to do, when and how to do it, and being about it. That every day we wake up knowing that what we're going to do is making an impact, that we are living into our purpose, and that as we do so, we're helping not only ourselves, but the collective. Because to truly have meaning and purpose, we know all of our actions are connected then to the collective. So we want to be very, very mindful of how we are living out what we feel is ours to do. So that's the first 4. I need a breath. Number five, which was show 53, right?
Yeah,
that was last week was the first show of year 2. And I think it's really perfect for where the show is. And it's perfect for my personal life as well. You identify with the soul and not the body. Okay, we went into depth on this, and mainly what we're thinking about when we're saying we identify with the soul and not the body, we realize everything that's coming to us, everything we experience, has a very specific purpose. And so rather than connecting in and trying to manage and mold life to fit what our ego wants are, we realize what's coming to us is a result of where our soul is in consciousness. And then we seek to not only understand that, but learn that, and then make new decisions, new connections that are based on the inner feeling and guidance that we're experiencing in and through our soul. Soul, not body, really means I'm not living from my mind and body consciousness. I'm living from my inner world, from the level of the soul. So that was number 5. You identify with the soul, not the body. Number 6, today, you seek opportunities to be vulnerable. Like Dave said, you might be saying, I don't know if I'm going to seek it. But I'm going to say a word before our break. I know we're getting close to our break, but I feel like I want to say a couple things about this word, vulnerable. Especially when we've been hurt in some way, which all of us have. We were in church, I'd say, "Can I have an amen?"
Amen. You can say it here.
Yeah,
we've established that.
Where's
you can
where's
say
your
it
hanky? I want you to wave a hanky. So that word vulnerable can be charged because it can tend to mean weak. All right. But when I'm saying the word vulnerable, a place of vulnerability is a tremendous place of strength because it means I'm strong enough in myself to know that no matter what happens, I'm safe. No matter what anybody says to me, I'm safe. So seeking to be vulnerable means I seek relationships that are authentic to the point that even if somebody is saying something to me, I'm not really interested in hearing, which did just happen to me the other day. It was like, oh, wow, yeah, there's this number 6 coming through. I can defend here or I can be vulnerable. So when we defend, it means our wound is bigger than our healing.
Mm.
Yeah.
You should say that again.
What was it?
When we defend.
When we defend, it means our wound is bigger than our healing in this area. Right? So, for instance, if you have a tendency to care about what everybody thinks, well, if somebody says something about your appearance, then it would be easy to go, oh my God, to really react to that negatively. And if they say that, we might go, oh, wow, that was really helpful. I'm glad they told me I missed a button on my shirt, right. Or I'm really glad they told me I had something between my teeth after I ate pepper at lunch.
Yeah, a big chunk of my beard or something.
Yeah, I don't know what that would be like. That's interesting, Dave. But these tiny little comments can really, impact us negatively if that's a place where we haven't done our healing. So, seeking opportunities to be vulnerable. We're going to talk more about this. I feel like we should go ahead and do a quick break.
Yeah, before we dive in.
Super deep. And again, friends, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the journey, and we'll be right back.
We'll return to the program in just a few moments, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partner, CCU Orlando, who has helped make this episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey possible. CCU Orlando is a welcoming community dedicated to transforming lives, celebrating diversity, and supporting soul growth. CCU Orlando is located at 771 Holden Avenue in Orlando, Florida, with Sunday services at 9 and 11 a.m. You can stream services live online as well as learn more at christchurchunity.net. We'd also like to thank our podcast partner, Natural Awakenings Magazine of Central Florida and Greater Orlando. Each month, Natural Awakenings magazines across the country take a practical look at the latest natural approaches to nutrition, fitness, creative expression, personal growth, and sustainable living. Natural Awakenings magazine is a free publication and is available in selected stores, health and education centers, healing centers, public libraries, and wherever free publications are located. You could learn more, including advertising opportunities for your business at nacfl.com. And finally, we'd like to extend our special thanks to our podcast partner, Unity of Nashville, a sister ministry of CCU Orlando. If you're searching for a like-minded church community and a personal connection that supports your heart and mind in the Central Tennessee area, then join Unity of Nashville at 10 a.m. every Sunday morning at 5125 Franklin Pike. For more information, head over to unityofnashville.org. And we now return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey with your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Welcome back. And we were joking at the break because I pulled my shoes off. And I said, I guess I need to be ready for somebody to say, ooh.
So you were being vulnerable. This was an object lesson.
It was. I like having my shoes off.
When I find myself to be the most vulnerable, actually, is with my students.
Yes.
At Full Sail. I have a portion in one of my lectures where I'm demonstrating like where creative ideas can come from and everything, and I play them a recording of me singing some sort of melodic idea I heard really poorly. I mean, it sounds terrible. It's embarrassingly bad. And I just tell them, hey guys, I'm going to be vulnerable with you here, and show so I can show them kind of the creative process and how that works. And I have found that it's about wanting, like when I want to give them that trust. You know what I mean? Like I want to be vulnerable with them, and it tells them that I am entrusting my safety.
Absolutely.
For lack of I'm trusting my safety with them. And you're about to hear me do something potentially embarrassing, something that might change your opinion of me or whatever. If they think I'm a great singer, which they would have no reason to think that. But it always ends well. I've never had it go sideways. I've never had it go bad.
Right. And I think it's important what you're saying, because we are, it has to do with week 5 or sign number 5, which is identifying with the soul and not the body. When you set that up, what you're really with your students, you're really creating a safe container, and you're telling them, I trust you enough to be vulnerable, which then has the opposite
gives
effect.
them permission to be vulnerable with me.
Exactly, which is, again, identifying with the soul and not the body. Because if you're identifying with the body, you would say, well, what I'm about to sing is really crappy, and I hope you like it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
In other words, please don't tell me this is bad, because if you do, it's going to hurt my feelings, and I'm not going to love myself anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's really, really important what you're saying. And I want to take it back just a little bit stepwise. So when we're living from the body, or like we often like to say, the personality or the ego self, we're living from kind of this muted character structure. Our character structure, it definitely involves the personality and how we think we are supposed to act. So it's the opposite of vulnerability. When we're vulnerable, we are who we are, and that the whole show for me, Authentic Spiritual Journey, is about us learning. About us learning to do exactly that. To be who we are, to be where we are, to be authentic with where we are, is that lives beyond this kind of limited character structure. Which has been a lifelong journey for me, and I think for all of us. I don't know. There's something about turning 50 that certain things that I used to worry about, I don't anymore. Just kind of coming into myself more as a person, as a woman, just as a human. And it's because I'm more clear, I think, about the other 5 points we've talked about so far, that no matter what is happening, my soul is bigger and more expansive than whatever experience I find myself in. So I can little by little, as I move forward in life, I'm learning to trust even more and be more vulnerable with who I am. So let me give you some examples. Growing up, I grew up in the South. I grew up in Georgia, and it really wasn't very popular to be a gay woman, in that time and in that setting. And I never really questioned that. A lot of people talk about their coming out. Well, I was never really in, so I don't know about the coming out thing. But so I had to choose really early on how I was going to handle that. Do I be myself? Like, I didn't do a big coming out really with my family. I mean, I think my closest sister, I made sure, like, she knew. She was like, yeah, no kidding. I was just waiting for you to tell me, like, finally. And I said, well, I just thought when I brought a girl home and started calling her honey, you knew what that meant. So that was really a vulnerable thing. And I knew I would probably get some looks, some judgments, but it's like, Audre Lorde has a poem, and it's something like, we can sit silent as bottles, but it will not keep us, it doesn't keep us safe. So there's this idea that when we're defended, or when we are secretive, or when we are guarded with who we really are, that we're somehow safer, but the opposite is actually true. And so we're spending a lot of us spend a lot of our lives trying to be something or someone we think everybody wants us to be, rather than just being the authentic self. And it takes a lot less energy to be the authentic self, and then frees you up to then live your meaning and purpose and do the work you're supposed to do and love others and serve others and all the great things we talk about doing here on the show. So I want to mention to you, if you find yourself, still kind of trying to make and mold yourself to fit what somebody else wants, it's really time to give that up. Time to give that up. We've grown past that. And I think right now in the world, I mean, what I see is the world needs your light more than ever before.
Yep.
Yeah. So another example, when I was in college, I was a percussion major. Of course, I was the only woman who was a percussion major.
Yeah, as a male percussion major, can confirm that's how it is.
Yeah, that's how it is. And so every day, every rehearsal, every time I met a new teacher, I had the the great opportunity, whether I wanted it or not, was I going to try to convince these guys that I was as good as they were, or would I just be cool and hang out and whatever? I'm sure I probably did both, as a youngster, just trying to figure life out. But what I know today is that I still have contact, with one of my with one of my teachers who taught me a great deal about being vulnerable. And actually, as a man, he was super cool, vulnerable as well. So I'm saying all this to say, it's not like these principles that we're talking about. You have to wait till there's some big spiritual happening and go, okay, now I'm being vulnerable. It's life. Mm-hmm. So seeking opportunities to be vulnerable means I show up as myself. I say what I like and dislike, even if somebody in my family asks me and I don't normally stand up to them. That's what that means. That if my friend, if my loved one, if a partner or spouse asks me something, rather than trying to be what they want, I say the truth. And sometimes that can be very difficult. So I seek opportunities to be vulnerable simply means as I go through life, I seek opportunities really to be my authentic self, which is a very vulnerable thing to do. Yeah, very vulnerable thing to do.
Yeah, and it can be tough when you've been vulnerable, and maybe you got burned by that. Maybe the people that you entrusted your safety with maybe didn't respect that or didn't understand the gravity of it, and that can be tough when you kind of pour yourself out for someone and they kind of shred it.
Yes, and that's an important point because when I say you seek opportunities to be vulnerable, it doesn't mean we're not boundaried. Because I've had the very thing happen that you're saying too, Dave. And I think there's a lot of points to consider around this idea that you mentioned. I'm so glad you mentioned it. Because no matter what anybody does with my vulnerability, I'm responsible for me and only me, not how others react, right? So if I'm basing what I do on how others react or act, whatever, then that's my issue because I'm not being vulnerable and authentic. And there are certain people that we are around that if we have our vulnerability in full display, we may be hurt on purpose by them. So again, it doesn't mean we're not boundaried. So, Jesus said it this way, don't put your pearls before swine. So
yeah, basically know your audience,
know your audience. And so, and I think vulnerability doesn't mean, I share my business all over town. It means I don't defend emotionally and try to control what everybody's doing and saying around me. I'm as much my authentic self as possible in every situation I find myself. Like if somebody says, who's a good friend, how are you? We don't go, oh, I'm fine. And we're dying on the inside.
Yeah, if you're not fine,
you're not fine. You might say, oh, tough day. A good friend will say, tell me about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's where the healing comes, where we can really get some support. But now if there's somebody we barely know at the grocery store, they say, how are you? And we go, I'm a mess. They're going to go, I'll get my manager.
Right.
Not quite the right place to do that. Yeah. So, but again, these are all steps of a mature soul. I know our listeners would not go out and probably do that, but it's just to be aware that as we talk about these things, it doesn't mean, well, I'm just some boundaryless kind of like spiritual globby stuff that goes, ooh, yes, all is well, and I can tell everybody my business and expect them to love and support me. It's not that. It's that the vulnerability is from the inside out, and I'm seeking to live life from this authentic place that no matter what anybody says or does, I basically bring myself to the table. So we seek opportunities to be vulnerable means as we go through life, go to the store, hang out with friends, talk to our neighbors, that we are vulnerable in that we are the authentic person we are seeking to be. And then again, engaging all these other 7 signs, right? If you love yourself, you're going to seek opportunities to be vulnerable because you're learning to honor who you are in the process. All of these points are going together. You can't be vulnerable if your heart is not open and loving, right? Because the opposite of that is the opposite of vulnerability, right? So, I had a situation, the other day, and I really had to stop myself because I was tired. I was kind of going through a lot emotionally myself over the last couple days, and I almost went into defense mode. And then I found myself doing it, and I was able to stop and breathe and say, you know what? Thank you for sharing that with me. I am so sorry. And it was like, okay, and then we could move on. But it's when we catch ourselves, say, wanting to defend or wanting to, deflect, or especially, friend, if we're blaming, that's the opposite of vulnerability. If we find ourselves doing that rather than shaming ourselves about it, we go, oh man, we try to go back and clean that up as much as possible. And then we forgive ourselves and we move on. Because remember, and I'm saying friends, like I mean it, remember, friends, this is a journey. No one, including me, does it perfectly, but my intention is to evolve, meaning that when I find myself in the same situation again, I want to do it differently because I'm living more from love. Yeah.
I tell you where I have problems being vulnerable. It's actually not with my art. Having worked with publishers and everything and putting myself out there.
I was going to say, as a musician, you got to get used to it.
You get a pretty thick skin.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it doesn't prick sometimes, even this past couple of weeks, it's been really bumpy with one of my publishers. But actually it's when this is going to sound weird and maybe prideful. I don't mean it this way, but I tend to know a lot about a lot of things, whether it's tech or whether it's music or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just because I'm a lifelong learner. I'm always learning, and I'm always
totally.
And so a lot of times people will just ask my opinion, or hey, how do the monitors work, or the Wi-Fi is broken, or how do you do this in Sibelius, or this kind of thing, right?
How do I get my email to work on my iPhone, Dave?
That may or may not be autobiographical.
Yeah, right.
But not knowing and being okay with saying, I don't know that, because I feel good about myself when I can help people.
Yeah. And
I like the fact that people come to me and ask for help. But to be able to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's tough, because that makes that. There's a chivalrous thing about that. About
yes,
like when you bend down and when you bow your head, you expose the back of your neck. And that's what that's about. That's why you bow in front of a king.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you're exposing the back of your neck. So I guess in medieval times, if the king hated you, whack.
Off with your head.
Right, but that's why they when you get knighted, that's what they're doing. Not that me fixing your phone is tantamount to being knighted by the queen, but. But yeah, so that's a growth area for me.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and I will share. An issue for me has been. So I'm going to back up. There was some way I took on the idea that things were my fault. Now, I don't know if it's because I'm an abuse survivor, which I am. I don't know if it's because I'm from a huge family and somebody always had to be, responsible for what was happening. But that was just the way I took things in. Like if something needed to be done, or let's say even somebody had a feeling about something, like I needed to fix it. So, and the internal message I got was like, I'm wrong. And somehow by not doing something about it, you know what I mean? So it's been a trigger for me, and this is as vulnerable as I know how to be. If somebody's making me wrong, I want to go, of course I am. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, I've always been wrong. Mm. So it's like, oh yes, how can I make you happy? How can I shift and change this so that I'm not wrong, right? And so how that's looked over my lifetime is, if I feel like somebody's making me wrong, well, I'm going to want to defend that because I'm not wrong. How could I be wrong? So learning to sit in that feeling has helped me not feel wrong. It's the weirdest thing. It's like, okay, well, you just said like the worst thing that you could ever say to me, like, this is your fault. And there was something actually very freeing about that. It's like, okay, it's my fault. That's a matter of opinion, I was thinking to myself. And so I feel wrong. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to defend. I'm going to sit in this and see what happens. And you know what happened is that the feeling faded, and then I could figure out what was mine to do from that place of vulnerability. So it was actually a really strong thing to not react, even though emotionally I had this charge that I really wanted to,
Yeah, it's because the truth is there.
Yeah.
But when you're in that place, you just put mud and junk on top and everything on top of it.
Yes.
And it has to wash away so that the truth can be revealed again.
Yes. Yes. And I'm still working with it. I will work with that probably my whole life. I'm saying this and sharing this because it's very vulnerable, because we all have those places. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yours might be, you need to be right. Yours might be, you need to not be wrong, whatever it might be. Yours may be, I have to be the smartest person in the room. And so what happens when you're not?
I guess. Yeah, maybe. I think that's what it is. The smartest person in the room, or the funniest, or
Yeah. I think.
And you feed off of it.
You do.
And there's some narcissism sprinkled in there.
Oh, for sure.
There's probably a healthy dose of narcissism.
I can't wait till we get to the Enneagram and we're talking personality types with you.
But yeah, it's yep.
Yeah, so we all have these, these are kind of like Achilles heel issues that reside within the soul. So they are personality issues, but they're opportunities for soul learning, right? Yeah. So when we grow up, based on how we're parented, the environment we find ourselves in, even the race and culture we might be growing up in, has its own set of kind of these often unspoken rules. And so we figure out, based on our family dynamics, if you've never studied family systems theory, you might want to, these dynamics, the way they come forward. Well, the way I take them in might be real different from the way my siblings take them in, and certain things I've noticed that over the years. Certain things I deal with, I don't think my siblings do, and certain things we all do the same. Yeah. So even though it resides in the personality, it's like it's there for you to learn and grow as a soul. So every place you find yourself, whether it's like me, the youngest of many children, the oldest, whatever, all this is an aspect of your karma as a result of your soul work, and then how you grow through that is what we're speaking of here on every single show, which is evolving, the authentic spiritual journey. So. Even though all of us want to do it perfectly, the fact is, friends, there is no perfect.
Yeah.
We're all learning. And so all of these 7 signs, including this one, are really strong intentions for how we want to grow and evolve as a soul. And so all of us have these areas of our lives that tend to trip us up. And so rather than pretending those aren't there, part of the vulnerability is saying, hey, I'm dealing with this right now. And hey, I said to somebody one time, hey, if you're giving me feedback, I can totally handle it, but just please don't scream it and we'll be good. Please don't scream it and I can take it in a little bit easier. Yeah. So we seek opportunities to be vulnerable is the thought we're leaving you with today. And what I know about all the ways we're speaking of it is that as you're in conversation, as you're, even looking on Facebook and watching the news, you're going to begin to see when people are in defense mode. You're going to be seeing when you're in defense mode. And it's always easier to see someone else. But remember, we always want to come back to ourselves and say, how am I to be growing and evolving, in and through this relational situation?
Yeah, just one more kind of little story.
Sure.
One of the areas that I know that me and Shannon together are kind of being vulnerable, and I also see this as kind of putting yourself out there, yourself is, Shannon and I are extremely self-contained relationship-wise, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
We keep to ourselves for the most part. We don't go out and party and all of that stuff. We got, this is the benefit of 25 years, which we just celebrated last week.
I know, congratulations. Yeah, that's awesome. I know, you're too busy working.
I know, right. But one of the things that we've consciously done is said yes to a couple of kind of little baby blooming relationships with some other friends.
Yeah.
Another couple.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, as long as they're cool with our level of busyness and our level of crazy, and we might like back out the last minute, that as long as we're okay with that. But that's been a real growth. And part of that, I'm just now realizing the reason we got so kind of closed down is because we had some really good friends back even before Memphis, back in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And politically,
it's
the
been
way
tough.
they've been politically now,
Yeah.
I feel like they're virtually unrecognizable.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's been tough. And so we've been kind of close. We've only really ever had like just a handful of super close friends, tons of acquaintances and colleagues and everything. But yeah, we're consciously kind of being vulnerable with this other group of friends and putting ourselves out there and kind of riding it and seeing how it goes.
Yeah, it's a real freeing thing to do, really, because you don't feel hemmed in by others' expectations, and then you get to decide at what level you're ready. As I said, you don't have to be best friends right away. You do things every now and then, and you're kind of just, seeing how it goes. Nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, it's a great way to do it as you're getting to know new people. So we want to be as conscious as possible in our relationships, also realizing, we all slip up. So we just honor wherever you are on the journey with this particular teaching, because it is a pretty deep teaching. And especially, I will say, with the political climate right now, that you will often hear me say, I'm not super happy with Democrats or Republicans at the moment, because everyone just seems to be trying to be the angriest and the loudest and, name calling. I mean, this is the opposite of an evolving soul. And so I just am calling that for what it is. And, all we can do is try to live our lives the best we can, vote who we think is the best. But name calling and leading with anger, this is not evolution. This is going backwards, as a matter of fact. So there's a lot of choice points in our society right now around all these issues, and they just seem to be getting calcified in the political climate. But that's just indicative of what's happening consciousness-wise, because other people are really going the opposite way in terms of love and peace and loving at a greater level than I've ever seen as well.
Right.
So that's coming forward. So to wrap our show, I want to read all 7 of these 7 signs so that you can, again, plant these in your consciousness and like me, pray for their blooming as we expand as souls. Number 1, you love yourself. Number 2, your heart is open and loving. Number 3, you are aware you are one with all. Number 4, your life is meaningful and has purpose. Number 5, you identify with the soul and not the body. Number 6, you seek opportunities to be vulnerable. And finally, number 7, you feel comfortable in the unknown. So those seven signs of
next week.
That's the one next week. Yep. Hold on to your hat, friends. Kansas is going bye-bye.
Gonna need a nap after that one.
All right. Blessings, friends. Thank you again for joining us. And we want to, again, thank you for all of you who've stepped up and supported us. And I know, Dave, there is a way now that people can do a one-time gift, and I wanted to make sure we made people aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we, for the last year, we've had our patron set up. So if you are looking to support the show on a monthly basis, with patron support starts at $2. So for less of the price of a cup of coffee.
Less than half.
Less than, right. Right. But we have had several folks who just kind of don't want to kind of get into an ongoing thing, and they can make a one-time donation. And you can do that by going over to experienceofthesoul.com, clicking on support. And there's our normal links for patrons for recurring donations, and there is a link there for one-time donations made through PayPal.
Through PayPal. So, yes, thank you so much for joining us, friends, and for supporting the show the way you do. We just feel honored by your level of commitment to us, and our goal is to support you on the spiritual journey, of course, the journey of the evolving soul. So, blessings, friends, and we'll see you next week.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey, presented by CCU Orlando, Natural Awakenings Magazine, and Unity of Nashville. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is made possible through the continued support of our angel patrons, Dove Borland, Peter Gibson, Paul Caswell, J.J. Hamilton, Arlene Meyer, Kathy and Terry, and Marcia Mott. If you would like to support the channel as a patron on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. And if you enjoy this podcast, you can help spread the word by sharing it with your friends and leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, or the platform of your choice. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2019, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.